Someone is always watching you. Someone is always measuring you. Make sure what they see cannot be used against you. My great-gram stayed out of the sun. When I had first found my great-grandmother in the 1910 census, she was 10 years old in Louisiana, and she was listed as mulatto. I remember this was the first time I had seen the census record of my family, and I double, triple checked it. I looked the years previously, and I saw her parents were actually listed as black. I was like, that's weird. I printed out the paper, I slid it into a yellow folder, and I wrote their last name across the top in a marker, and I pushed it under my bed. And I didn't tell anyone. I knew I had found something that maybe I wasn't supposed to find. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero. Welcome to the NYTN podcast, where we talk about American identity and family stories. I love history. That is my first love. Even though I taught history, got my degrees in history, a lot of American history is new to me, has been new to me since I started learning about my family experience here in the U.S. Maybe you have heard of the term paper bag test. Picture a brown paper lunch bag, like the cheap kind that you used to have at school. Maybe it's been folded up in your kitchen drawer for years, a little wrinkled at the corners. Now I want you to picture someone holding that bag up against your arm. They look at it. They look at you. And another time and in another place, that comparison would have determined whether you could walk through the front door, whether you could sit downstairs at the movies, whether you would be welcomed into certain spaces, whether or not you would be considered fully human by the people around you. It wasn't a law book. It wasn't inside a courthouse. And most of the time, these were not even people with real authority. It was just a paper bag. This practice had a name. It was called, colloquially, the paper bag test. And today I'm going to tell you exactly what it was and how I found its fingerprints inside my own family tree. Here's what I have learned after 20 years of researching my family. The tests we think happen to other people in other places and in another time, they still have a way of showing up in your records or in your family or in habits no one ever explained to you. It wasn't a single institution. It wasn't invented by one person or enforced by one law, at least as far as I can tell. This was informal, it was widespread, but devastatingly effective. And it grew out of American colorism, this idea that light skin meant proximity to whiteness, and proximity to whiteness means access to clubs, churches, jobs, safety. We have a brown paper bag held against a person's skin. If you're lighter than the bag, you're in. If you're darker, you're not. Now, I actually did this test a year or so ago, so maybe I'll use that in the thumbnail on the podcast on Patreon. So if you want to check that out, I'll put that on there. Some people placed the test at the doors of black social clubs and fraternities in the early 20th century, organizations that themselves were shut out of white institutions entirely. Some people say that they actually built their own walls using that logic that had been used against them. I don't know. I don't know all of that. I'm telling you anecdotes, what people have told me, people who are older than me, who have experienced different things, that the test was not only imposed from the outside, it was also adopted inside communities of color as a way of managing who could move through certain spaces without drawing attention, but it didn't stop at the bag. Then there was the pencil test. So I'm going to tell you a story first before I tell you about the pencil test. I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and we had a hornet problem at my house in New York. The hornets would just nosedive you. You go outside, you try to check the mail, hornets. They were all over you. Maybe they were called wasps. I don't know the difference. All I know is that it was like dangerous. One weekend, my dad pulls out his ladder and he has like this pump spray. And he told me, Dealy, that was my nickname, Dealy, do not come near me while I'm spraying this. I'm going to spray this all around the perimeter of the roof. And it's going to not only keep wasps away, but they're going to die. And so if you get this in your hair or anything, they're going to die in your hair. Guess what happened? I was curious. Like I said, I wasn't that old. And my hair is At the time, it was really long. It was to my waist. And it's textured. Sometimes it's really curly, sometimes it's wavy. It depends on the day and if it's a full moon, okay? But some of this stuff got in my hair. And guess what? You know where this is going. The wasps, some of them were attracted to it, and they died in my hair. I honestly blacked out. I don't know how these wasps got out. My mom must have done it. But I was screaming, and it was bad. So when I was learning about the pencil test, the actual pencil test, what they did is they slid a pencil into your hair, and if the pencil stayed, if it was held tight by textured hair or curly hair or coiled hair, you failed. And if it slipped through, you passed. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I know exactly which side of that test I would have landed on, at least. What's strange to me about that is there are a lot of groups that have real thick textured hair, curly hair. That pencil test is like a joke. I actually would use pencils to hold my hair up in school if I didn't have a rubber band because it wouldn't come out. There was this pattern when I was interviewing my Grammy and other family members when they were talking about my great-grandmother Lola, who's from Louisiana. Every relative I interviewed, literally every relative, they were from different cities, different ages, different branches of the family. They all told me basically the same version of this. My great-grandmother never went in the sun. Now, some of them were saying it kind of like a quirk. I'd be like, tell me about Gram. And they're telling me she was, super Catholic, walked to mass every day, loved making cornbread, also never went in the sun. Every single time, though, I remember thinking, I need to follow up on this. But I'm like, what do I ask? I don't know. Okay. But then I got on a Zoom call with my mom's cousin, John. And John has such a warm, unhurried way of talking. Some people you just, before they say a thing, you're going to laugh. That's how he is. And so we were going through memories of his grandmother, Lola. Her routines, what was she like? Because he lived really close by, helped her with chores. She couldn't drive, so they helped her with that. And he told me about his mom and his grandmother, Lola. He said, well, my mother, Maggie, she was really protective of going into the sun. Never. No way. So, they knew. Now, I tried to stay quiet because if you're a good interviewer, which I wasn't and I'm working on becoming, you want to give people space to kind of have their thought. So I stayed quiet. And I'm thinking, knew what exactly? Because I did come to understand later that he wasn't describing a beauty habit. He was describing something that had been passed down in my family without it ever being explained. That his mom had absorbed it the way children absorb everything around us that matters, not just through instruction, but watching. They watch the way an adult flinches at certain things, through what stuff doesn't get said. So I thought, knew what exactly? Now, my great-grandmother, at this point, he's remembering, she doesn't live in Louisiana anymore. She lives in Albany, New York. And that's hundreds, if not 1,000 miles from Louisiana, far from paper bag tests, the pencil tests. Obviously, New York was not perfect, but it was not the same as being in the South during Jim Crow, right? I found part of the answer when I had interviewed Professor Robert Caldwell. He's a citizen of the Choctaw Apache community of Ebarb, which I actually have connections to as well. His family history runs through the same part of Louisiana as Lola's maternal line. And I asked him what the daily life was like for his family navigating that color line in the community. And so he leans forward. He's really thoughtful. He leans forward real quietly. I can tell he's thinking about how to say what he's going to say next. And said that his grandmother as a little girl was told by the family, don't play in the sun too long. If you play in the sun too long, you'll get too dark. And she was already dark. And so that was very real for her. You have a grandmother warning her grandchild about playing in the sun. Not because of heat or sunburn, but they're afraid of what? And then my Aunt Nancy, when I was interviewing her, she gave me the final piece. This was my mom's sister. And she was telling me about Uncle Alphonse. And this was Lola's son. He was also raised in Albany, raised to be French and Irish, no other stories ever offered. And she leaned really close to the camera. This was during COVID, so we're on the Zoom. And she dropped her voice, even though we were on Zoom. I'm like, no one can hear you, Aunt Nancy, but I think it's just stuff that's ingrained. She drops her voice. And she said, I remember he told me this story. There was this woman at the corner store they used to go to, and she would stop him every time and accuse him and say, you're the son of that Indian woman, aren't you? And he would just stand there confused. What are you talking about? Because nobody had told him enough to understand. But Lola, I think, in her attempt to stay out of the sun and these attempts at warning children, stay out of the sun, the paper bag test, the pencil test followed Lola all the way to New York. Maybe not the physical bag, but the logic underneath it. We need a better word, not logic. The structure, the system that was holding it up, that says someone is always watching you. Someone is always measuring you. Make sure what they see cannot be used against you. So my great-gram stayed out of the sun. A lot of good it did her. I saw some pictures of her. I'm like, I don't think she was passing like she thought. In 2004, I was graduating high school. And before our senior banquet and all that stuff, all the girls I knew were going to tanning beds before the senior dinner. And they talked about like they're going to the spa. They're like, we have a special lotion. We got tanning goggles. You've got music in there. One girl is telling me that she goes twice a week, actually. And I asked my mom, and she said I wasn't allowed to go, which I probably didn't need to go. You want to fit in when you're in high school. But it got me thinking now, because these girls were chasing the exact thing my family had spent years running from, getting color. And I didn't understand that then. I don't even know if it registered with me at that point. But when I think about it now and the distance between my friends in those tanning beds and my great-grandmother standing in the shade maybe of every summer afternoon with the family, the distance isn't as far as it looks. It's one generation, maybe two. And when I had first found my great-grandmother in the 1910 census, she was 10 years old in Louisiana, and she was listed as mulatto. I remember this was the first time I had seen a census record of my family. And I double, triple checked it. I looked the years previously, and I saw her parents were actually listed as Black. I was like, that's weird. But I printed out the paper. I slid it into a yellow folder, and I wrote their last name across the top in a marker, and I pushed it under my bed. And I didn't tell anyone. I knew I had found something that maybe I wasn't supposed to find. The tests, though, were never really about skin, right, or hair. It was about control, about forcing people into categories that a broken system believed it needed in order to function. We had to have insider versus outsider, safe versus dangerous, human versus less than. And families like mine, maybe yours, responded by becoming experts in a counter strategy. Change your name, stay in the shade, keep the kids close so no one could hurt them. And my grandmother Marion, my Grammy, I call her Grammy, she was beautiful. She did not just inherit her mom's features, though. She inherited that strategy. And I like to think I inherited some of her features, but what I really inherited was the absence of a family story that had been carefully curated and removed for our protection. So the image I asked you about in the beginning, that paper bag, here's what I want you to do with it now. No matter what your background is, think about your own family tree. Think about a couple where maybe a marriage record is missing, or a family that had moved between census times, between that decade, far away, maybe for no obvious reason. People whose race is recorded differently on documents. A lot of us have this. Habits nobody ever explained. Why is everybody staying out of the sun? What's going on? The questions that get redirected when you ask your auntie such and such a question, she's not going to answer you. These are not dead ends in your story. This is the test showing up in your records. Maybe the paper bag test, the pencil test, the colorism that was sorting families out. And I think once you know what to look for, you start seeing it. I had no idea what any of this was until I started asking family members to tell me stories. I'm sad. I feel like Lola never really told us who she was. And she decided that whatever the future was, that was more important than the truth. And I do still think it's a tragedy. Obviously, I'm doing everything I can to reclaim that. I've had to sit with this for a long time, but I also think that it's an act of love that's so enormous. I'm not sure I have the right words for it yet. She planted a family tree and hoped we could grow in the shade of that. And 20 years later, I'm there standing in the sun trying to find her. And if you want to do the same for your family, if you're ready to get into those records and look for context and see what the silences are actually saying. I love talking about how silence is a record too, right? That's what my Patreon is for. I have the guides and tools designed specifically for families where the paper trail went quiet on purpose. So I'll leave links to that in the show notes. Come dig with me. I'm Danielle Romero. I'll see you next time.